My daughter forgot to hang up the phone, and I overheard her say, "He has to go to a nursing home." I stayed silent. Later, they sold my house for $5 million and took off on a luxury trip to Japan. When they came back, smiling and ready to move in, the key fit, but on the doorstep was a note. The moment they read it, they started screaming. That day, my daughter made a fatal mistake. She thought she'd hung up the phone, but the words I overheard were a chilling blueprint for my complete and utter ruin. What she didn't realize was that my late wife, Clara, had already left me a blueprint of her own, one that would tear her plans to shreds. It started like so many other conversations, you know. The familiar tune. Jessica, my daughter, humming on and on about the house being too big, the maintenance too much. Always, for my own good, of course. I'd give my usual gentle reply, telling her not to worry, that I had everything under control. It was a dance we performed, a careful choreography of her feigned concern and my polite deflection. I knew what she wanted. I just never truly knew how far she was willing to go to get it. Then came the sigh, a sound of practiced frustration. "Okay, Dad. Well, listen, I've got to run. Tom's calling me on the other line. I'll call you back later, okay?" I said my goodbye, expecting the click that would end the conversation. But it never came. Instead, the line went quiet for a fraction of a second, just enough for me to hear a muffled rustle as she shifted the phone from one ear to the other. Then, my son-in-law Tom's voice, clear as day, "Did you talk to the realtor yet?" My blood went cold. I froze there in the garden, pruning shears still in my hand. A single rose petal clung to the blade. Jessica's voice returned, but it was different now. The warmth was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp efficiency. It was the voice of a businesswoman closing a deal. "Yes," she said. "He thinks we can get $5 million, maybe more. If we move fast, we'll have enough for the condo downtown and that long trip to Japan. But first, he has to go to a nursing home. I'll handle the paperwork this week. He won't even know what's happening until it's done, $5 million. A nursing home." The words hung in the quiet garden air, ugly and venomous. It wasn't just the plan that shocked me. It was the casual cruelty of it all, the complete absence of love. It was as if she were discussing liquidating an asset, not disposing of her own father. I didn't breathe. The buzzing of a bee near a vibrant red rose seemed deafening. The sweet scent of the flowers turned bitter in my nostrils. My entire peaceful, orderly world had narrowed to the poison coming through that small speaker. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, listening to the silence on the other end of the line. After she finally disconnected properly, I slowly lowered the phone. My hand was steady. There was no rage, no crushing wave of grief. Just a profound, chilling clarity. I walked back into the house Clara and I had built, the house where we'd raised the daughter who was now planning to evict me. I went straight to my study, to the old mahogany desk that had been my father's. I opened the bottom drawer, the one that was always locked. My mind flashed back 3 years, to a hospital room, the sterile smell and the beeping machines. I remembered holding Clara's frail hand, and Jessica's tearful promise, "I'll take care of Dad, Mom. Don't forget." That promise was a lie. Her tears were just a performance. I reached into the back of the drawer and my fingers closed around a small, cold piece of metal. It was a key. A key I hadn't touched in 3 years. Later that evening, I made myself a cup of tea and sat in the living room. The silence felt like a heavy blanket. This house was filled with ghosts, but they were friendly ones. I saw Clara in the way the moonlight fell across her favorite armchair. I heard her laughter in the creak of the floorboards upstairs. This wasn't just wood and plaster, it was the archive of our life together. My mind, trained by 40 years as a financial planner, began to work. Not with emotion, but with data. I wasn't grieving the betrayal anymore. I was analyzing it, tracing it back to its source, connecting the dots I had refused to see before. My thoughts drifted back 6 months to a Sunday dinner. Tom had leaned across the table, his face a picture of sincere concern. "Walt," he'd said, "you should really let Jessica have power of attorney, you know, for your finances and medical decisions. Just to make things easier on you in case anything happens." It had sounded so reasonable, so responsible. I had politely declined, stating I was still perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. I saw a flicker of annoyance in Jessica's eyes before she covered it with a smile. That was the first cut. Then there was the armchair. I came home from my weekly grocery run to find two movers carrying Clara's favorite wingback chair out the front door. Jessica was directing them, a bright, false smile on her face. "Dad," she'd announced, "I got you a surprise. I found a much more modern recliner for you online. This old thing was so dated, it was bringing the whole room down." She hadn't asked. She had simply erased a piece of my wife, a piece of my history, and replaced it with something new and sterile that she found more acceptable. I said nothing. I let the silence speak for me, but I knew she didn't understand its language. That was the second cut. The final memory was the sharpest. I'd come home early from a doctor's appointment a few weeks ago. The house was quiet, and I walked in through the back door. From the kitchen, I heard Jessica's voice, sharp and brittle, utterly unlike the sweet tone she used with me. She was on the phone with one of her friends. "I can't just drop everything and go to Bali for a month," she complained. "Are you kidding me? I have to stay here and look after my father. It's a full-time job." The hypocrisy of it was breathtaking. Her care consisted of a 30-minute visit once a week, most of which was spent scrolling through her phone. The lie, the portrayal of herself as a long-suffering martyr, was a deeper wound than any simple complaint could ever be. That was the third cut. These memories didn't bring pain now. They brought focus. They were pieces of a puzzle. And with the words I'd heard in the garden, the final piece had clicked into place. As if on cue, my phone rang again. It was Jessica. Her voice once again dripping with manufactured sweetness. "Hi, Dad. Good news. Tom and I decided to take that anniversary trip to Japan we've been talking about. We'll be gone for 2 weeks, but we wanted to come over this weekend and give you a big surprise first." A surprise. I knew what the surprise was. It was the opening move of her campaign. The first gentle push towards the nursing home. "That sounds wonderful, dear," I said, my voice even and calm. "You two deserve a nice vacation." I gave her my blessing. I gave her the rope. After I hung up, I stood and walked to the small table by the door where I kept my keys. I didn't take the keys to my new sedan. I took the older, heavier set, the ones from my 20-year-old pickup truck. I knew exactly where I was going. I was going to the bank. The old pickup truck rumbled down the familiar streets. But I saw nothing. Not the neighbor waving from his porch. Not the kids playing street hockey. Not the vibrant autumn leaves that Clara had loved so much. My world had shrunk to the space between my hands on the steering wheel and the road ahead. There was no anger left, no sorrow. They had been burned away, leaving behind something hard and clear, like a diamond. A purpose. The drive to First National Bank was less than 10 minutes. But in that short span, a lifetime of memories played out behind my eyes. I saw Jessica on her first bicycle, scraped knees and a triumphant smile. I saw her at her high school graduation, her future as bright as the flashbulbs of the cameras. I saw her standing by her mother's grave, her face a mask of grief I now knew was hollow. I had to separate the daughter I had raised from the woman she had become. One was a cherished memory. The other was an adversary. The bank lobby was a stark contrast to the storm in my mind. It was a place of mundane transactions and quiet order. People stood in line, checked their phones, waited for their numbers to be called. I was just another face in the crowd, an elderly man in a worn tweed jacket. Someone you would pass on the street and forget instantly. A young professional woman named Maria greeted me with a polite smile. "Mr. Hayes, good to see you. How can we help you today?" I told her I needed to access my safe deposit box. She nodded, her smile never wavering, and led me toward the back. We walked through a carpeted hallway to a set of polished steel bars. Beyond them lay the vault. Maria unlocked the gate and swung it open, the movement smooth and silent. The air inside the vault was different. It was cool, dry, and smelled faintly of metal and old paper. It was the scent of secrets, of wealth, of things kept safe from the ravages of time. She led me to a wall of small, identical metal doors. Number 347. My signature was compared to the one on the card. A perfect match. Then came the ritual I remembered so well. Maria inserted the bank's key into one lock. I inserted my own small, cold key into the other. She turned hers. Then I turned mine. There was a satisfying heavy click as the tumblers aligned. The mechanism was unlocked. Maria, with professional discretion, pulled the long metal box from its compartment and placed it in my hands before gesturing toward a small private viewing room. "Take all the time you need, Mr. Hayes," she said. And then she was gone, leaving me alone with the past. The room was small and bare, containing only a table and a single chair. I placed the box on the table. It felt heavier than I remembered, heavy with unspoken words. With a love that had planned for a betrayal it hoped would never come. My hands were perfectly steady as I lifted the lid. Inside the box, nestled on a bed of old documents, were two items. The first was a thick, legal-looking binder bound in dark blue leather, its spine unlabeled. The second was a simple, cream-colored envelope, sealed with a drop of wax that bore the faint impression of a rose. My name, Walter, was written on the front in Clara's elegant, familiar script. My heart clenched. It was a letter from the past, a voice I thought was lost to me forever. I set the heavy binder aside and picked up the envelope. My fingers trembled slightly as I broke the wax seal. The paper inside was crisp, and the scent of Clara's lavender perfume, faint but unmistakable, rose to meet me. I unfolded the pages and began to read. "My dearest Walter," she began. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and you have finally found the need to open this box. I am so sorry, my love. I am sorry that a time has come where you felt you had to look for answers here. I prayed this day would never arrive, that my worries were just the foolish anxieties of a wife who loved her husband too much. But I also knew I had to prepare, just in case. My love for you was never anxious or foolish. It was practical. It was my life's greatest work. Please know that what you are about to discover in this box was not born from a lack of love for our Jessica. I love our daughter with every fiber of my being. I see the best of us in her. Your determination, my eye for detail. But I also see a part of her that worries me. A pragmatism so sharp it sometimes cuts away at the softer things, the more important things. She measures the world in outcomes and successes, in forward momentum. Sometimes, in her rush to get ahead, she forgets to look at the people she is leaving behind. She loves you, Walter. I truly believe that. But she loves you in her own way, and sometimes her way does not put your heart first. I could not bear the thought of my darling husband, the man who gave me a lifetime of unwavering devotion, spending his final years in a place where his comfort was a line item on a monthly bill. That is why I did what I did. The binder in this box contains the legal framework for the Clara Hayes Family Trust. I used a portion of my own inheritance, the money my father left me, to set it up years ago. Our home, this beautiful house filled with our memories, is the primary asset of that trust. It does not belong to you, and it does not belong to Jessica. It belongs to the future we built together. I did this to protect you, my love, to give you a shield. A home is not just an asset to be liquidated. It is a sanctuary. It is the keeper of our stories. And you, Walter, are its most precious guardian. You have every right to live in our home, surrounded by our memories, for as long as you draw a breath. That right is absolute and unassailable. I have made sure of it. This was my final gift to you. A fortress of love to keep you safe when I no longer can. Live your life fully. Fill that house with music and the smell of baking bread. Keep my roses blooming, and know, with every sunset you watch from the porch, that my love is still there, watching over you. All my love, forever, Clara. Tears I didn't know I had been holding back streamed down my face, blurring the beautiful script. They were not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming gratitude and love. She had seen it all those years ago. She had seen the potential for this exact heartbreak, and she had built me an ark. She had known the precise nature of our daughter's ambition and the cold logic she might one day employ. The letter was not a condemnation of Jessica. It was a testament to Clara's profound understanding of human nature. She had not acted out of anger, but out of a fierce, protective love. She had left me more than a house. She had left me a plan. She had left me permission. I carefully folded the letter and placed it back in its envelope. Then, with a newfound resolve, I reached for the dark blue binder. It was time to read the rest of her instructions. My tears for Clara dried, but the warmth of her love remained, a steadying presence in the cool, quiet room. I placed her letter carefully back on the table, a sacred text I would return to later. Now there was work to do. I pulled the heavy, dark blue binder towards me and opened it. The pages were thick, creamy cardstock, covered in the dense, impenetrable language of the law. To most people, it would be an intimidating wall of text, but to me, it was a familiar landscape. For 40 years as a financial planner, I had navigated these forests of jargon, translating complex trusts and estates for my clients. I knew the language of whereas and heretofore. I understood the subtle power hidden in a well-placed comma. This was my territory. My eyes scanned the first few pages with professional speed. The Clara Hayes Family Trust, established on the 10th of May 2012. I noted the key appointments. Clara was the settlor, the creator of the trust. I, Walter Hayes, was named as the sole lifelong trustee, the manager of the assets. Our daughter, Jessica Hayes Martin, was listed as the primary beneficiary, the one who would inherit upon my passing. It all seemed straightforward, a standard arrangement to protect the house from probate court and ensure a smooth transfer of assets. I turned the page, my mind working methodically, searching for the fine print. The little details where the true intent of a document always resides. I found it in Section 7, titled Conditions and Stipulations of Beneficiary Inheritance. My finger traced the lines of text as I read. Clause 7A was standard, outlining that the beneficiary must be of legal age and sound mind. But then I came to Clause 7B. I stopped. I read the words once, my brow furrowed in concentration. Then I read them again, slower this time, letting each word sink in. It was written in precise, unambiguous legal terms: the inheritance of the primary asset, the property located at 128 Maplewood Drive, by the beneficiary, Jessica Hayes Martin, is contingent upon the fulfillment of a duty of care towards the lifelong trustee, Walter Hayes. This duty of care is defined as providing a stable, respectful, and supportive living environment for the trustee within the aforementioned property. The determination of whether this clause has been violated rests solely and absolutely with the trustee. In the event the trustee determines this clause has been breached, he is granted the full and irrevocable power to execute the alternative directive outlined in Appendix A, the immediate liquidation of the trust's assets with all proceeds to be donated in their entirety to the designated charitable organization. I leaned back in the chair, the binder resting in my lap. My breath caught in my chest. This was no shield. A shield is a defensive tool meant to absorb a blow. This was a sword. It was a perfectly crafted, razor-sharp weapon that had been placed in my hand by the woman who knew me best. She had not just protected me. She had empowered me. She had trusted my judgment. The phone call from the garden replayed in my head, Jessica's cold, clinical voice discussing my fate as if I were a piece of furniture. He has to go to a nursing home. A stable, respectful, and supportive living environment. The irony was so profound, it was almost comical. They had not just failed to meet the condition. They had shattered it into a million pieces. A slow smile spread across my face. It wasn't a smile of malice or revenge. It was the quiet, confident smile of a man who had just been reminded that he was not powerless. It was the smile of a man who had just been handed a blueprint, written in the ink of his wife's love, for how to reclaim his dignity. I closed the binder. The weapon had been found. Now I just needed an ally to help me wield it. The address on the back of the business card led me to a sleek, modern building in the heart of the city's financial district. The law offices of Reed and Associates were on the 32nd floor. I stepped out of the elevator into a space that was the complete opposite of my warm, cluttered home. It was a world of clean lines, polished chrome, and cool-toned art. It was quiet and beautiful. Her hair was a stylish silver, cut short and sharp. She wore a tailored gray suit, and her eyes, behind a pair of elegant glasses, were intelligent and missed nothing. There was no pretense about her, no false warmth. She was a person who dealt in facts. She walked towards me and extended a hand. Her handshake was firm and dry. "Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice calm and even. "Evelyn Reed. Please have a seat. Thank you for coming in." There were no empty pleasantries, no questions about the weather or the traffic. It was straight to business. I appreciated that. I sat in the leather chair opposite her large, uncluttered desk. I didn't waste time either. "My wife was Clara Hayes," I began, my voice steady. "You prepared a family trust for her about 13 years ago. I'm here today because I believe a clause in that trust is about to be violated." At the mention of Clara's name, a subtle shift occurred in Evelyn's professional demeanor. The sharpness in her eyes softened, replaced by a flicker of genuine warmth and remembrance. A faint smile touched her lips. "Clara," she said, her voice taking on a softer tone. "She was one of the most formidable women I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. Whip-smart and fiercely loyal. She always thought 10 steps ahead of everyone else." She leaned forward slightly, her focus entirely on me now. "I'm not surprised you're here, Mr. Hayes. When we drafted that document, she made me promise I'd be ready for your call, even if she hoped it would never come. So tell me, what did Jessica do?" Her directness was bracing. It cleared away all the emotional fog and left only the hard facts of the situation. I recounted the story of the phone call, keeping my tone as level and objective as I could. I laid out the facts, the plan to sell the house, the intention to move me into an assisted living facility, the cold financial calculus behind it all. I presented it not as a heartbroken father, but as a client stating the details of a breach of contract. Evelyn listened without interruption, her fingers steepled under her chin. Her expression was unreadable, but I could see a storm gathering in her intelligent eyes. It was the quiet anger of a professional who was seeing a friend's worst fears realized. When I finished, she was silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on the skyline. Then she turned back to me, her face set with grim determination. "I see," she said softly. "It seems Clara's foresight was, as usual, painfully accurate." She reached for a drawer in her desk and pulled out a binder identical to the one I had in my briefcase. She placed it squarely in the center of the desk between us. The blue leather seemed to absorb the light in the room. "All right, Walter," she said, her voice now crisp and full of purpose. "Let's get to work. Let's read your wife's instructions together." The two blue binders lay on the desk like a pair of matching bookends, silent testaments to my wife's foresight. Evelyn tapped a perfectly manicured finger on the cover of her copy. "Clara and I spent a month working on this document," she said, her voice a low, serious hum. She wanted every clause to be ironclad, especially Section 7. She called it the Dignity Clause. I nodded, the term feeling profoundly right. Dignity was exactly what was at stake. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a slim file folder, placing it on the desk next to the trust. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Evelyn opened it. Inside were the printed emails from Tom, the ones where he casually but persistently pushed for me to sign over power of attorney. There were receipts for the new, soulless furniture Jessica had bought to replace Clara's cherished pieces. There was also a single sheet of paper on which I had written down, verbatim, the words I had overheard in the garden, along with the date and time. It was the methodical habit of a man used to keeping records. Evelyn read through everything carefully, her expression unchanging. She placed the papers back into the folder with precision. "This is more than enough," she stated, her voice leaving no room for doubt. "The language of Clause 7b is intentionally subjective. Clara gave you, the trustee, sole discretionary power. Your testimony alone, backed by this pattern of behavior, constitutes an undeniable breach. There will be no lengthy court battle. Jessica will have no legal ground to stand on. Her own actions have effectively disinherited her. So, the question isn't if you can act, Walter. The question is how and when." The energy in the room shifted. We were no longer reviewing the past. We were architecting the future. I leaned forward in my chair. I don't want to fight, I said, my voice firm. I don't want to drag Clara's memory through months of legal wrangling. I want it to be clean, final. I want to follow her instructions to the letter. Evelyn nodded, her mind already racing ahead. I agree. A conventional sale is out of the question. It takes months. There are mortgage applications, inspections, public listings. It's slow and messy. We need a private transaction, a cash offer. She paused, her gaze drifting towards the window as if scanning the city for a solution. A real estate developer, she mused. Someone who wants the land, someone who will pay a premium for the location, and is willing to close quickly and with absolute discretion. It was then I played my best card, the piece of information that would turn the possible into the probable. Jessica and Tom are leaving for a celebratory trip to Japan, I said. They leave in 3 days. They'll be gone for 14. Evelyn's eyes snapped back to mine, and for the first time, I saw a flash of genuine excitement. A slow, predatory smile spread across her face. 14 days, she whispered, the words full of possibility. That's an incredibly aggressive timeline, Walter. But for a $5 million property in this market, with a motivated seller, it's possible. She tapped her pen on the desk, a rapid, rhythmic beat. I know a firm, Sterling Real Estate Development. They specialize in off-market acquisitions. They are fast, they are quiet, and they pay in cash. The plan began to form between us, a constructive shared intellect and purpose. We'll use an intermediary, Evelyn continued, her voice gaining momentum. A third-party asset management company will represent the trust in the sale. Your name and mine will not appear on any of the initial paperwork. Sterling will see a family trust liquidating an asset. Nothing more. So, by the time Jessica gets back, I finished for her. It will be an accomplished fact. An accomplished fact, she confirmed. The house will be sold. The money will be in the trust's account. And from there, transfer directly to the Clara Hayes Music Scholarship Fund at the university. All perfectly legal, all perfectly executed according to her final wishes. She leaned back, the plan now fully formed in the air between us. She looked at me, her professional mask falling away for just a moment to reveal the friend beneath. Clara would be so proud of you, Walter, she said softly. You're not doing this for revenge. You're doing this for dignity. Hers and yours. I gave a single firm nod. That was all the confirmation she needed. Evelyn Reed picked up her phone, her thumb hovering over her contacts. Let's make a call, shall we? She said. The first move of the counterattack was about to be made. Evelyn turned to the last page of the binder, to a section labeled Appendix A. Her expression softened once more. There's one more thing you should know, Walter, she said, about where the money goes. It was very important to Clara. She turned the binder around for me to see. The designated charity wasn't a large, faceless organization. The text was simple, the Clara Hayes Music Scholarship, to be administered by the State University's Department of Fine Arts. Clara told me once that music saved her life, Evelyn explained, her voice gentle. She grew up with very little. As you know, her family could never have afforded piano lessons, but a local benefactor, a woman she never even met, paid for her to learn. Clara said the piano gave her a language for all the feelings she could never put into words. It was her sanctuary. Her greatest wish was to be that anonymous benefactor for another generation of children who had talent but no money. I pictured Clara at our old upright piano, her fingers dancing across the keys, her eyes closed in concentration, a small, peaceful smile on her face. It was her favorite place in the world. This wasn't about erasing a memory of her. It was about amplifying it, turning our home into a legacy that would echo in concert halls and practice rooms for years to come. It was the most beautiful, perfect thing she could have imagined. My quiet resolve hardened into a righteous certainty. This was no longer just about protecting my dignity. It was about fulfilling her dream. As if summoned by the gravity of the moment, my phone began to buzz on the desk. The screen lit up with a picture of Jessica, smiling brightly from a family photo taken years ago. The smiling woman on the screen felt like a stranger now. I looked at Evelyn. She gave me a single, decisive nod. I answered the call and pressed the speakerphone button. Dad. Jessica's voice chirped, full of a breathless, artificial excitement. You are not going to believe this. Tom and I were looking at flights just for fun, you know, for our anniversary. And we found the most amazing deal to Japan. To Tokyo. I looked at Evelyn. Her face was a perfect, unreadable mask, but I saw the glint in her eyes. The universe wasn't just giving us an opportunity. It was serving it to us on a silver platter. They were leaving. They were leaving the field wide open for us. The dramatic irony was so thick I could almost taste it. They were taking a victory lap for a race they hadn't even run yet. My voice was calm, even kind when I replied, "That is wonderful news, Jessica. You too deserve a nice vacation after working so hard." A small, silent apology to Clara passed through my mind for the lie. Have a wonderful time. And don't worry about a thing here. Oh, we won't, Dad, she said, her relief palpable. Well, see you when we get back. Love you. The line went dead. I placed the phone back on the desk. The silence in the office was absolute. Evelyn and I looked at each other. The final piece had just clicked into place. Well, she said, a hint of steel in her voice. It seems your daughter has just given us our timeline. The 2 weeks that followed were a masterclass in parallel lives. My daughter's world was a bright, noisy, and public spectacle. Mine was a quiet, deliberate, and invisible operation. Her story began at the airport with a smiling selfie posted online. She and Tom, beaming, stood before the departures board. The caption read, "Off to Tokyo. Time for a much-needed celebration." Thousands of miles away, my story began in Evelyn Reed's office. She was on the phone, her voice the epitome of calm authority. "Mr. Sterling," she said, looking at me with a steady gaze. "The trust is prepared to accept your cash offer. We can have the preliminary documents signed and delivered by courier before the end of the business day." The starting gun had been fired. Jessica's timeline unfolded in a series of glossy photographs on social media. There she was, laughing in the serene gardens of a Shinto shrine. There was Tom, raising a glass of expensive sake in a restaurant where the bill was likely more than my monthly pension. They held up shopping bags from the luxury stores of Ginza, their faces flushed with the thrill of spending money they believed was already theirs. Hashtags followed every post, hashtag blessed anniversary trip, hashtag living our best life. They were building a public narrative of success, a performance for their friends and followers. All of it funded by a fantasy. My timeline unfolded in a series of quiet, decisive actions. The mountain of paperwork arrived. I sat at my dining room table, the same table where we'd celebrated Jessica's every birthday, and signed document after document, not as Walter Hayes, the father, but as Walter Hayes, trustee. My signature was firm, a steady hand executing a final, necessary duty. There were no cameras, no audience. Just me and the weight of my wife's last wish. A few days later, a discreet appraiser from Sterling Development came to the house. He was a young, serious man who moved with quiet efficiency. He measured walls, tapped on support beams, and assessed the foundation. He didn't comment on Clara's rose garden. To him, the house was not a home. It was an asset, a parcel of land with a certain market value. I watched him work, a ghost in my own life, feeling a strange detachment as the soul of my home was translated into the cold language of a financial report. The pace quickened as the days wore on. The cuts between their life and mine grew shorter, sharper. A picture of Jessica and Tom posing in front of Mount Fuji appeared online, captioned, "On top of the world." At that exact moment, an email notification pinged on Evelyn's computer. The subject line was simple, "Wire transfer initiated." They posted a video of themselves on a speeding bullet train, the Japanese countryside a blur of green outside their window. I was sitting in a quiet office at a downtown bank with Evelyn and a representative from the asset management firm. We watched a different kind of blur, a string of numbers processing on a computer screen. There was a soft chime. The transfer was complete. $5 million, minus commissions and fees, now sat in the account of the Clara Hayes Family Trust. The final steps were almost anticlimactic in their simplicity. Evelyn made one last call. "The funds have cleared," she said into the phone. "You can proceed with the transfer to the beneficiary account." She wasn't talking about Jessica. She was talking about the university. The last action fell to me. The day before my daughter's flight was scheduled to land, a polite young woman from the management company came to the house. I had already moved my personal belongings, my boxes of memories, into storage. The house was empty, echoing and clean. I placed the keys in her hand. There was no grand ceremony. It was just a simple, quiet exchange, a final, irreversible transaction. The house was no longer mine. The stage was set. The trap was laid. All that was left was for the actors to make their final entrance. With the transaction complete, and the keys scheduled for handover, a strange quiet descended upon the house. The frantic energy of the past week was gone, replaced by the hollow echo of my own footsteps on the hardwood floors. The rooms, stripped of their furniture and rugs, looked cavernous and unfamiliar. My life was now condensed into a series of cardboard boxes stacked against the walls. I wasn't taking much, just the things that mattered, just the things that held our stories. My work was slow and deliberate. I carefully wrapped the small porcelain robin that had sat on Clara's bedside table for 30 years. I folded her favorite cashmere sweater, the scent of her lavender perfume still clinging faintly to the fabric, and placed it in a box labeled keepsakes. This wasn't just packing. It was a ritual of remembrance, a final quiet conversation with the woman I loved. At the bottom of an old cedar chest in the attic, my fingers brushed against the worn leather of a book. It was our first photo album. I sat down on the dusty floorboards and opened it. The pages were filled with the ghosts of a happier time, our wedding day, the day we brought Jessica home from the hospital, her first steps. I turned a page and a single photograph stopped my breath. It was a picture from a summer picnic when Jessica was 5. She was perched on my shoulders, her small hands tangled in my hair, her head thrown back in a fit of pure, unadulterated laughter. I was looking up at her, my own face alight with a kind of adoration only a father can know. We were a perfect, self-contained universe of joy in that frozen moment. I stared at the girl in the picture, at her bright, trusting eyes. Where did she go? What happened to the little girl who thought her father was the strongest, kindest man in the world? A wave of profound sadness washed over me, a grief not for the house or the money, but for the daughter I had lost long before she had planned to get rid of me. But the sadness did not bring doubt. It brought clarity. My actions were not a betrayal of this smiling child. They were a necessary consequence for the woman she had become. The woman who had forgotten this little girl ever existed. I looked at the photograph and spoke to it in the quiet of the attic. "This isn't for you," I whispered. "This is for the woman who forgot you. This is for your mother. And this is for me." It was an act of preservation. I was saving the memory of that joyful father from being destroyed by the callousness of his daughter. With a gentle hand, I closed the album. I walked back downstairs and placed it on the mantel of the fireplace, right in the center. I would not be taking it with me. That part of our story belonged to this house. And this house no longer belonged to me. I turned the key and the door to my new life swung open. It was a modern apartment on the 15th floor, with clean white walls and large windows that drank in the afternoon light. It was smaller than my old house, more compact, but it felt lighter. It wasn't filled with the ghosts of the past, but with the quiet promise of a future I could write for myself. I placed the single box I had carried up with me, the one labeled keepsakes, on the polished floor. It looked small in the empty room. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked out. The city spread out before me, a vibrant, sprawling map of a world that was no longer confined to a single street, a single garden. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple. Down below, the lights of cars moved like a river of stars. I took a deep breath, the first truly deep breath I had taken in years. It was the breath of a free man. I felt no sadness, no regret, only a profound, unshakable peace. The stage was set. The curtain was about to rise. All I had to do was wait. The black SUV pulled up to the curb, its engine purring with an expensive quiet. The doors opened and out stepped Jessica and Tom, looking rested, tanned, and triumphant. They wore new clothes that spoke of duty-free shopping sprees. In their luggage, plastered with tags from Tokyo, was a testament to their 2-week victory lap. They were laughing as Tom paid the driver. "The very first thing we do, before we even unpack," Jessica said, her voice giddy with anticipation, "is call the interior designer for the condo. I want that Italian marble." Tom slung an arm around her, pulling her close. "And after that," he added with a grin, "we book our tickets to the Maldives. First class this time." They were drunk on a future they had stolen, so sure of their victory that they could already taste it. They walked up the familiar stone path, Tom twirling the house key on his finger with a little flourish. At the front door, he leaned in to give Jessica a kiss before sliding the key into the lock. Or rather, he tried to. It wouldn't go in. He frowned, jiggling it slightly. He pulled it out and tried again, pushing with more force. Nothing. "What's wrong with this stupid thing?" he muttered, his good mood evaporating into a cloud of petty annoyance. "You're probably using the wrong key, genius," Jessica said, snatching it from him. She jammed the key into the lock with an air of superiority. It met the same solid resistance. The key that had opened this door for 20 years was suddenly a useless piece of metal. A flicker of unease passed between them. "Did your dad change the locks?" Tom asked, his voice now laced with confusion. "Why would he do that without telling us?" Jessica's face tightened. She hammered the doorbell, but no familiar chime echoed from within. She pressed her face against the living room window, cupping her hands around her eyes to block the glare. "Tom," she said, her voice suddenly small and tight. "The furniture, it's all gone." They both stared through the glass into the dark, empty rooms. The house was a hollow shell. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prickle at their skin. It was then that Jessica saw it. A crisp white envelope taped neatly to the center of the front door. It looked stark and official against the dark wood. She ripped it from its place, her hands fumbling as she tore it open. It wasn't a note from me. It was a single sheet of heavy bond paper bearing the letterhead of a law firm they had never heard of. Jessica read the words aloud, her voice starting as a whisper and rising with each devastating line. "To whom it may concern, please be advised that the property located at 128 Maplewood Drive was legally sold in a private transaction on the 12th of September. This is now the private property of Sterling Real Estate Development. Any attempt to access or enter the premises will be considered trespassing and will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." The final words hung in the air between them, sharp and deadly as shards of glass. The color drained from Tom's face. Jessica's hand flew to her mouth and a choked, strangled sound escaped her throat. They stood on the manicured lawn of a house that was no longer theirs, surrounded by their expensive luggage. And then, she finally began to scream. The shrill, panicked ringing of my phone was an intrusion, but not an unexpected one. I was sitting in my new armchair, looking out as the city lights began to glitter against the deep blue of the twilight sky. I saw Jessica's name on the screen. I let it ring twice more before answering, a small act of control. I took a slow, steadying breath and tapped the screen. The sound that erupted from the speaker was not a voice, but a raw, unfiltered shriek of rage and disbelief. "Dad! What did you do?" The words were distorted by her fury. "Where are you? Someone sold our house. Our house. There's a sign on the door. Some legal notice. Did you get scammed? Did someone take advantage of you? Oh my God, Tom is calling the police right now. This is a nightmare." She was talking in frantic, overlapping bursts, her mind scrambling for an explanation that would fit her worldview. A world in which I was a problem to be managed, a victim to be handled, but never, ever an agent of my own will. I waited for her to run out of breath, the silence on my end of the line growing heavier with each of her frantic words. When she finally paused, gasping for air, I spoke. My voice was low, calm, and perfectly clear. The contrast to her hysteria was a weapon in itself. "Hello, Jessica," I said, as if greeting her for a Sunday dinner. "There's no need to call the police. No one scammed me." I paused, letting the silence stretch. And you are mistaken about one very important thing. It was never our house. The simple sentence landed like a stone in a quiet pond. Her rage faltered, replaced by a sputtering confusion. What? What are you talking about? Of course it's our house. It's the family home. It's been in the family for 50 years. Where are you? We need to fix this, Dad. You need to tell me what happened. She was still trying to be in charge, to fix the mess her incompetent old father had surely made. She still didn't understand that she wasn't fixing a problem. She was facing a judgment. No, Jessica, I said, my voice still level, cutting through her panic with the cool precision of a surgeon's scalpel. It was your mother's house, and I have simply done what she asked of me. I have followed her final wishes to the letter. I didn't give her time to respond. Everything you need to know has just been sent to your email. I suggest you read it carefully. Her voice was a strangled whisper now, the fury and entitlement replaced by a desperate, pleading tone I hadn't heard since she was a little girl who had broken a favorite toy. Email? What email? Dad, please don't do this. You can't do this to us. We're your family. I looked out at the city lights, at a future that was finally my own. Your mother gave you every opportunity to define what family meant, Jessica, I said, my voice soft but unyielding. You made your choice. Now you get to live with it. I took the phone from my ear, looked at her name on the screen one last time, and with a steady finger, I pressed the red button to end the call. The silence that filled my apartment was no longer empty. It was peaceful. It was the sound of a lock clicking into place on a door that would never be opened again. Her screams dissolved into ragged, desperate sobs. With trembling hands, Jessica fumbled with her phone, her thumbs swiping erratically across the screen as she searched for her email app. Tom stood beside her, a statue of disbelief, his face pale and slack-jawed. Finally, she found the email. The sender was an address she didn't recognize, a generic name from the asset management firm. The subject line was cold and impersonal, regarding the Clara Hayes Family Trust. She tapped it open. Her breath hitched. The screen was filled with a high-resolution scan of a legal document. The first page was the trust's declaration. Her eyes darted across the text, recognizing her mother's name, her father's name, and her own. Then she swiped to the next page. A section of text was highlighted in yellow. As she read the words about providing a stable, respectful, and supportive environment, she saw the sentence granting her father sole, absolute power to determine if the clause had been breached. Below that was another attachment. It was a bank statement. At the top was a single devastating number, a wire transfer dated 2 days prior for $5 million. The recipient was not her. It was the Clara Hayes Music Scholarship Fund. The phone slipped from her nervous fingers and clattered onto the stone walkway. The truth, in all its brutal, irrefutable clarity, had finally arrived. They hadn't been robbed. They hadn't been scammed. They had been outmaneuvered, outplanned, and utterly defeated by the quiet old man they thought was a fool. They sank to the curb amidst their luxury luggage, two shipwrecked survivors on an island of their own making. The echoes of their triumphant laughter now a bitter mockery. Miles away, in a quiet apartment overlooking the city, I placed the small framed photograph of Clara on the clean white mantel of my new fireplace. She was smiling, a look of serene confidence in her eyes, as if she knew this day would come. The city lights twinkled outside, a silent constellation of new possibilities. I looked at her picture, at the face of the woman who had given me one last perfect gift. We did it, Clara, I whispered to the quiet room. We did it. And for the first time in a very long time, my world was completely at peace.